that cell phones have a link to brain cancer, and that cell phone microwave radiation vibrates the DNA and basically breaks it into pieces, then causing mutations that causes cancer. But I saw an article last week when it was linked on drudgereport.com. Are cell phones really giving us cancer? CBS News. And I saw the expert there, Dr. Deborah Lee Davis, Ph.D., MPH, founder and president of Environmental Health Trust. And she's just got a prestigious background advising Congress, the UN, you name it, presidential administrations. Was selected by Time Magazine as a top pick for her book, received a silver medal from Nautilus Books, investigative journalism. I thought, wow, this is a great person to get on to give us her expert take on cell phones, because she's basically quoted here out of the CBS News piece saying, turn it off when you're not using it. I know this. I try to use a wire because I've seen in the studies that not a lot of the radiation travels up that for every inch you get away from a phone, that it basically dissipates by half, because the transmission wavelength, this is what engineers have told me, basically loses power for every distance you get away, measured by the length of the antenna. And that's just to kind of put it out there as a layman. She can correct me if I'm wrong, that it's not good to have these up against your head. It's not good for women to be tucking them into their shirt, in their bra. So many women I know carry their phones. It's not something you want to have in your front pocket by your genitals if you're a man. This is something you want to use sparingly, and try to use landlines. And just like cigarettes, when they had doctors in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, and 50s saying I'd walk a mile for a Camel, and, oh, cigarettes are good for your lungs, they knew full well by the 50s it was killing people. They knew earlier than that. So it was a conspiracy theory back then to say smoking was bad. It's now known. So I want to get her expert take on this, because even though I know this, I get on the cell phone too much. Even though I know this, I lose my hands-free wire, and I end up putting up against my head. I go to the mall or the supermarket, the grocery store, and I see so many little children, 6, 7, 8 years old, with cell phones glued to the sides of their heads, and I want to just warn their parents. But then even in my own family, I can't get my family to stop putting them up against their heads. And then we see so many people like, well, Senator Kennedy and others, they thought that was linked to a cell phone. I've talked to so many medical doctors, brain surgeons, who say they're seeing epidemics of tumors right up against the side of the head where people are using their cell phones. So, Dr. Davis, thank you so much for coming on the broadcast with us today.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate your interest.
Well, you've got the floor. What's going on with cell phones?
Well, first of all, as you indicated, most people don't realize that they're two-way microwave radios. And if they understood that, it would make them think very differently about it. But the term that we use to describe the radiation from a cell phone is microwave radiation. Well, it really, industry calls it radio frequency energy. Radio frequency energy sounds like something very nice. After all, radios make music. We all need extra energy. But it's not energy. It's radiation. Now, television towers send radiation out to your television, which receives it. But a cell phone works by sending and receiving microwave radiation 900 times a minute. That's every 900 milliseconds. Whether you're talking or not, so long as that phone is on, if it's in your pocket, if it's in your bra, if it's next to your head, it's sending or receiving a microwave signal every 900 milliseconds. And because of that, it has the ability, as you indicated before, to disturb our DNA, to weaken our membranes, and to cause things that are in our body to be more deeply absorbed. It's interesting, but if people don't believe this is a problem, they should go to our website, environmentalhealthtrust.org, and click on or search for cell phone survivors and non-survivors. There we have videos from people who have suffered the real consequences of using phones in ways that have caused themselves, unfortunately, to have brain cancer. And I think they're very moving stories that people need to hear more about.
Your site has a lot of links to mainline studies. Can we go back to the beginning, cell phones the last 30 years? Because I've talked to former Air Force, Army people, who would talk about setting up microwave relay towers in the desert and things to communicate, and how it would end up giving everybody in the team cancer 10 years later, 20 years later, or how they would put food in front of it and heat it up, heat up their beans with it. Well, cell phones are just doing that on a smaller scale, but cumulatively, I mean, we know it's in the studies that it's literally breaking up the DNA, disturbing the cells. It's been in the Time magazine. It's been in the Washington Post. What's crazy is this isn't really even denied, except industry tries to whitewash it. So where is it all going?
Well, let's stop for a second. I think you're absolutely right about, by the way, the old studies from the military. I've talked to guys who used microwave radiation to warm themselves on the deck of an aircraft carrier before they realized that it might be damaging. And that's how they discovered we could make microwave ovens, by the way, is somebody was standing in front of the radar tower and the chocolate in their pocket melted. So the first microwave ovens, in fact, were called radar ranges, because guys who invented them thought it would be really cool to cook with radar. Well, it turned out not to be such a cool idea for women, so they renamed it microwave. It sounded more dainty and more easy to sell to women, which it turned out to be. Where we are with the issue is the following. Microwave ovens cook food, and they use 1,000 watts of power, but the same frequency as a cell phone. So you've got power and you've got frequency. A cell phone is far too weak to cook anything. It has less than 1 watt of power, but it does have the same frequency as a microwave oven. And right away there, we tend to lose people, because it's not the power that's most important with cell phone radiation. It's the nature of the signal that is sent. And the signal is not a steady, continuous wave. It's irregular.
Which is meant to make all the different little particles bounce around, correct?
Exactly. And it works. It works very effectively for many purposes. But what it does, it sends information, it receives information, but the signal itself changes its power density in a 4-second phone call more than 20 times. So it's going 20 times up and down. And it's that up and down, it's that erratic signal, it's that bouncing that disturbs our cellular resonance. Every cell in our body is resonating normally to keep us in place, in balance. And cell phone radiation distracts that normal balance, that normal homeostasis, and it can weaken membranes, whether of the eye or of the hearing nerve or of the brain. And those weakened membranes are then more vulnerable to damage. In fact, cell phone-like radiation is being used now in medicine to enhance the delivery of some drugs into the brain for chemotherapy. So there's even a new field called electrochemotherapy, which uses a different kind of electricity in order to deliver drugs into the body. So we know that a cell phone-like radiation has biological effects. I think the problem we have is a disconnect, which is the title of my book, Disconnect: The Truth About Cell Phone Radiation, What Industry Has Done to Hide It, and How to Protect Your Family. And that book can be found, by the way, on Amazon or even as an ebook. If you buy the cover with the scream on it, then Environmental Health Trust, my nonprofit, benefits from it more.
Everyone should read this book, and I'm going to buy 10 copies, literally, and I'm going to give it to my family and say, let's stop putting the cell phones up to our heads. Or are you recommending just getting rid of them entirely?
No. I do not recommend getting rid of them, because they have revolutionized our ability to respond to emergencies. They have improved our ability to do a lot of things, but we have a right to know. We have a fundamental right to know how to use them more safely. And by the way, I've recently spoken to people, and the glacial U.S. government is responding. After 18 years, they have issued a formal request to ask whether they should change their 18-year-old standards for cell phones. So they're looking at the data, not very quickly, but they've started the process. In addition, if you go deep within your iPhone, you'll find advice now about how to use them safely. If you go to settings on your iPhone, and then you go to general, and from general, you go to about, and then in about, you go all the way down to something most people would never see called legal. You click on legal, and it gives you RF exposure information. And there it says, buried in the phone, to reduce RF exposure, use a headset or a hands-free option. and also says, do not keep the phone closer than 10 millimeters to the body, or you can exceed the as-tested exposure limits.
Incredible. And in fact, it was one of my crew a few months ago pointed that out, that not just on iPhones, but on most Droids, in legal, they're covering their butts now.
Yep.
And quietly slipping it in, if you read through dozens of pages of stuff, that, oh, this is something people should be concerned about. What about some of the studies I've seen that some people appear to be more almost allergic to frequency pollution, and so that's why it's worse for other people?
Certainly, there are some people who are much more sensitive to this. It's been very, very difficult to study because the studies have taken